Hi there, it's Riikka here with my second masculine project. Like the previous one, this one also has a vintage photo on top, and that kind of guided me throughout the project. Whereas the first project was inspired by Wild West, with this one we're heading to the woods. This project I started by making some wooden pieces. They are actually cut out of coasters using a Sussex die, and now I'm triple embossing them. Triple embossing means that I'm adding 3 layers of embossing powder to them. The first layer, as you can see, it's not that solid, but as I build in the layers, it's more thick and more solid. I need that thickness in order to have something to texturize later on. For the 2 first layers, I used just the honey powder, but for the third, I'm mixing in some bark. Then I heat the third layer and have my embossing folder inked and ready. So while the powder is still hot, I press the embossing folder on top, thus creating a dimensional layer. I repeat the process to the smaller one, and as my embossing folder is inked, I'm able to add another powder to the grooves. The bark powder which I'm using only sticks to those grooves which were inked. And like so, I have created 2 wooden or wood-like pieces. I want to add a little bit more texture and color to the outside of the 3 pieces or the bark piece. So I'm mixing in some texture powder with bark powder. Then I move on to my background. This is a MDF coaster I'm using, and again I'm creating a thick layer of embossing powder. For the first 2 layers I use Chartreuse embossing powder, but the third I'm again mixing in more colors. This time it's a mix of honey, honeydew and lemon. This is to create a more varying or more natural looking layer. For the 4th layer, I'm again mixing in the texture powder. So I'm using the mixture I already had in the 3rd layer and adding a little bit more of those yellow tones and then the texture powder. And that is the mix I'm using for the 4th layer, which is the last layer for the background. Next, I start to make the actual composition using the elements I already have done, which is the background and the wooden discs. I use just regular craft glue to adhere the wooden discs on top of my coaster, which is my background, and then layering smaller elements on top. I first ink a tag and some tickets to make them more vintagey, more worn. Then I make a composition out of them using a stapler to attach the different paper layers and adhere the photo on top using a little bit of coaster pieces underneath to give it more dimension. I feel that the piece needs something more horizontal going on, so first I add a kind of measuring tape styled paper piece, but that's not enough. I need more dimension, more elements there. So I rummage through my stash and find 2 rusty nails. Whereas I can use just regular craft glue for the light paper elements, I need something sturdier for the nails, and for that I use gel medium. Gel medium is a wonderful adhesive because it's sturdy and it dries dimensional, so I'm able to use it to secure my nails in place. Because I have such a dimensional background for my photo, I again need to use something to make the composition more solid. So I cut some pieces out of the coaster. I adhere them near to the rusty nails and thus have a more secure place for my focal point. Next, I'm doing some moss. I'm mixing the same powders I already have with some green flock, which is kind of little particles of fabric. Then I dilute some craft glue, paint it here and there across my piece, and then just drizzle the moss on top. Even though there's embossing powder in it, I'm not melting the powder, but more like using it as a texture. And again, it's bringing that background and foreground all together because there's the same color. Now I'm finishing the piece with some vintage buttons and a bit of twine and then some text stickers. The mossy effect here looks a bit strange still because the adhesive is still wet, so it looks like it's more pale or more white than it is when it's all done. I cut my sentiment into pieces and adhere them in place, so it's almost done. Then I have the idea to add a little bit more something underneath the text, and I'm going to use a paper clip there. But the paper clip I have is silver colored, so it doesn't fit to the color scheme I have, the rustic kind of color scheme I have going on in the project. So as it's metal, I'm able to heat it and then drizzle the powder on top, so I don't need any extra adhesive or extra ink to transfer or to emboss the paper clip. The powder I'm using is Crusty Copper from the Metalz set. Then it's just adding the paper clip in place and the piece is done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked the video and a couple of little tips I have there. And just let me know if you have any questions. Bye bye for now.